In this episode of the Exploring Information Security podcast, what is application security? Welcome to the Exploring Information Security podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I am your host, Timothy D. Block, and in this episode, we will be exploring what is application security. And with me today to do that is Frank Catucci from Qualys. Frank, how are you?
Not too bad, Tim. Not too bad. Long day, but besides that, I'm all right. How about yourself?
Good. I'm a little tired, so yeah, long day. So first question, it's a toughie. What is application security?
Well, you could Google the answer and kind of get that, but what I'll give you is kind of what I've seen as basically the definition of all. So if you talk about application security, a lot of people just jump right away into what they see in the headlines and things today. But if you think about the old client architecture where people were writing code, essentially client executables, fat clients, essentially programs that were running on desktops, and everything was functioning locally, maybe tying back to a central database or a central server or a client-server architecture even a little bit later. There was not a whole lot of thought put into the security of those applications in the code that was written. And I think nor did it really have to be at that time. I know it's a little rough to say, but there really wasn't the security and hacking exposure as much back then with those kind of client architectures. So there's a lot of developers and code that was written where that really wasn't getting reviewed to the extent that it should have been. And so what happened was the internet. So essentially, all of the applications and platforms that were previously running client-server architecture, fat clients, those type of things, were evolving to web-based applications or web applications, web apps. And when that happened, something very kind of interesting followed. So what happened was you have these, always up and accessible applications that are no longer sitting, behind your firewall in your computer that gets turned off every day at 5 o'clock. You had these applications that were being written for browsers to be able to use rather than, rather than the client server architecture. And with that, we have a whole new kind of premise that came about of maybe being able to remotely exploit and remotely take liberties with code that's written in a web-based form. So how application security, how I define it essentially is, I kind of really focus it down now to web application security. And how I break that down again is, application security essentially is using, trying to secure code and methods to protect any kind of applications or web applications from vulnerabilities, threats, and things that can be, exploited via the application to get data or to get any kind of compromise within that application, whether it would be escalated privilege, finding a function or something that is not supposed to carry over, or being able to get data from a database that sits behind the application that feeds basically everything that you have. So that's essentially how I would describe it. There's a lot of evolution with application security, and I think that it's real easy to look at it now and say, oh yeah, we're going to implement these methods within our SDLCs. We're going to try to look at this. We're going to try to look at that, or we're using these new frameworks that have a ton of security already built in. And a little bit that's taking a little bit of things for granted. I mean, it's good in a way. I'm glad that it's evolving that way. But it's just been a very interesting history in application security over the past, I guess time gets away from me easily, 10 years, something like that. But
Right. So it's essentially it's within the programming developer realm of technology.
yes and no, because what happens is you have a lot of systems that feed together, right? So,
Mhm.
if someone's code's not fantastic, that's great. But if someone didn't, if someone didn't do something properly on the back end or the network side, the DBA missed something in setting up something on the database side, it's not solely resting on the shoulders of developers. I mean, don't get me wrong, most of it is, but there's still some knowledge that carries over, with network security
Mhm.
and other kind of security methodologies that are there. And it's not just resting on the developers, although, let's be honest, most of it probably still will be. But
Certain, you do have to patch your firewalls and your networking equipment
your
from
web
time to
servers,
time. Yep.
yeah, keep your SSL. There's a lot of different parts to it, right?
Right.
So it could be a lot of different aspects there.
So how does and I know that there's several different ways that you can exploit it, but just generally, how does someone exploit an application?
So there's a lot of different ways that you can look to exploit an application. So you can look to exploit the code on the application itself. You could look to exploit perhaps a misconfiguration. You could exploit a missing patch. You could use any of the methodologies in the OWASP top 10, or most of them. If you're looking to target an application, you could look at the layer that the application's sitting on. So, sure, the application's sitting at layer 7, but what kind of web server is sitting on? What's missing there? Is there any kind of privileges that are associated with it? Can we manipulate the application? Is it vulnerable to cross-site scripting, SQL injection, etc.? If we have authenticated sessions, are they implementing CSRF tokens correctly? Can I use a different, sure, I can log in, but is it validating this token on every request, etc.? So the amount of different ways that you can actually exploit an application are essentially, I hate to say infinite, but there are a lot of different ways that you can look to exploit the application. And so, thinking outside the box is half the battle, I think, because there's never one scenario where everything's going to be perfect or completely secure. So
Yeah, so it's
there,
essentially someone manipulating an application to perform a function when they're exploiting it that it wasn't intended.
yeah. Yeah, so there's a part of an older definition that's out there that I still like to use because people, it's easy to forget, right? The applications are only controlling the kind of resources that are granted to them, but they don't have any control over which resources, right? So if something's misconfigured, if there is a way to get around something or escalate, or if there's some kind of malformed something that your application is not expecting, what's the behavior, what information can I get from that unexpected behavior? Can I get further information to find out that sure, your web application can intake SQL queries? Okay, great. Well, now what can I do to dump that? What can I do to take that and use that to my advantage to try to get into there? So the applications are doing a little bit of what they're designed to do, but it's when you start trying to get them to do things that they weren't designed to do that it gets interesting.
Yeah, and I like that definition of how you put that. That's I think a pretty general way to describe it without getting too technical, because application security is deep, and there's just so many different, especially with Internet of Things coming up and mobile exploding within the general populace. There's just applications everywhere now, and you can easily go down like one path and
Sure.
still never learn absolutely everything. So it's a very broad, I guess, discipline at this point.
It is, sure, and mobile applications are a whole different animal. A lot of what we see out there with mobile application is, people are saying, oh, we're going to do some kind of analysis on the code that the application's written on it, and that's wonderful. But let's face it, most of those applications are calling back to some kind of APIs, and when that happens, exactly what's getting transmitted back and forth is that, what can I do with that API once I have a key or something like that? So, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and you have the best of the best working on some of these projects, to secure these things. Apple's code review and things for iOS, for the App Store, and you still have different things that are getting through, and found that we packaged an exploited version of Xcode in one of these things that slipped through in the latest one. I mean, there's still a lot of different things that can just happen. I mean, and we're only talking about one tiny sliver of application security at this point.
Why is application security important?
Application security is important because I think nowadays, web application is your business. It's your face. Think about how many companies that you interact with on a day-to-day basis solely online. If you went back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, every company that you did business with, you had some kind of relationship with, maybe brick and mortar, maybe not, but you weren't online, right? So what a percentage of those businesses that you are solely using online for, right? And, not just social media, but I mean, Amazon, eBay, paying your bills, maybe your bank, things like that. It's so many different aspects of your life, of your, of your family, of your well-being, of your home, your car, your insurance. I mean, everything else, right? So, everything lives through basically, essentially, a web application at this point. And keeping that kind of business secure, I think, kind of speaks for itself on why it's important, or from my perspective, it does. There's constantly new vulnerabilities being found. There's, every company is data, they're hoarding data, right? So if you look at the amount of data that was created, most of it was created in the last 5 years. And the fact is that most of that data is accessible via a web application. So what's your data worth? I have free credit monitoring from 4 places probably for the rest of my life. But besides that, what does it cost your company? What does it cost someone like eBay or Amazon, to be offline for an hour? How much of that is their revenue or their livelihood? So not just on a personal level, but a business level as well. I mean, it's important for everybody. Essentially, again, it's really everything that you can imagine. The face and the brand reputation, personal reputation, etc. So I think there's a lot of speaking for itself on that point, but a lot of different aspects.
Okay. Well, so what does application security done right look like?
So done right. So I think finding out what's done right for your particular organization is probably the biggest challenge. So usually I break this down into a few different layers. I like to say, okay, so let's take a perspective of this organization. So what does this organization value? How do you do your development? Where is your data, etc. And we what we need to do is that we need to look at it from a couple different aspects, right? So first of all, we need some kind of buy-in, at the C-level to say, yes, application security is important. And if you get that, almost anything else that I'm going to say is possible. But without that, it's almost sure to fail. So, I think nowadays it's a lot easier to get that kind of buy-in from C-level. I think everybody kind of understands why it's important to their business. So it's a little bit easier. So once that kind of buy-in or support from your executives is given for application security, we need to take a look at a few different things and really develop an application security program, and that should not just be limited to you know doing very, very, very granular tasks. I mean, this really needs to be broad. It needs to be a broader net, and it needs to start at the top. So we need to look at how we're onboarding applications. Like when we first look at a web application, are we thinking about security when we're whiteboarding this thing before a single line of code is written? We want to onboard an application. We need some business owners. We need some technical owners. We need these meetings with security folks and application security people to understand how this application is going to evolve. What's it going to have access to, et cetera. And from there, I really, really, really like application security integrated into SDLCs. Software development life cycles, integrating security into there for me is usually going to be a much, much better security posture than people who don't. Empowering and training your developers as they write code to do analysis and application security, giving them the tools and the knowledge and the training to do this is going to make everybody's life easier. And then, obviously every step of the way, anywhere from, again, onboarding the application on a whiteboard when it gets, reviewed and overviewed, have security in mind, to being able to have code review and those kind of things done, at strictly developer level, before it even gets to a test environment or a QA environment, and then obviously production, pre-production, change control, etc. So really building the posture in from the beginning is what I like to say is a really good step in doing it the right way. Now, will that mean that it's done right? I don't know. Hopefully for your organization, it'll, again, be a step in the right direction. But there's using uniform frameworks. So let's say that your company's you have a lot of legacy applications. You're moving to new all new applications that we're doing will be written in XYZ. Okay, well, in XYZ, are there resources that we can use? Can everybody use React or Angular or something? Can we use a common language or a common framework or something to keep consistency across our code, and those kind of things, to make other people be able to use the advantages of some of those newer frameworks and security built in. And there's a lot to it, and keeping a regular web application security program and constantly reevaluating for improvements. Hire some good pen testers, even if you think your security's top notch. Get some feedback, do regular kind of white box, black box scanning, that kind of stuff. You always want to be able to knock out the low-hanging fruit before you pay a pen tester. They want to go in there. You should have them finding the stuff that's very difficult to find. Combination attacks, complex business logic, those kind of things. Not something like, hey, I found cross-site scripting on this parameter. Well, that's lovely, but that should have been found how many iterations ago and fixed. So really trying to stay focused and finding out, again, what fits your organization best. But there's definitely a lot of best practices that I mentioned there that could probably keep someone busy for a few years, I would guess.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to explore this more, what is your number one resource for them to go explore?
Without a doubt, OWASP. So I'm a huge OWASP fan. I've been a member of OWASP for a very long time, and I'm a chapter leader for OWASP in the Columbia, South Carolina area with you, Tim.
Yes.
So the Open Web Application Security Project. Again, it's a worldwide profitable organization. Non-profit charitable organization, right? So, their front page, their mission statement essentially sums it up. It's to make software security visible and help educate and spread the truth about informed decisions, etc., on application security. It's really to educate and help people, and the amount of resources. Just going from OWASP.org on the wiki, you have a global network of application security experts, the best that exist, that contribute to all of these resources. I contribute to one right now, which is the Web Application Security Testing Cheat Sheet. So myself and some very, some probably much more talented people as well, such as Simon Bennett, et cetera, Rory McCune, et cetera. Again, we contribute to these and keeping them up to date and relevant, and trying to keep this data, accurate, et cetera. There's a lot of good training. There's a lot of good tools, a lot of open source tools, training, lab structures, those kind of things that people can take advantage of. So my number one is always OWASP, and I always like to use that as a descriptor, and having people give them a good place to start. Join your chapter, get involved, try to talk to people, get on the mailing lists, etc. You're going to get a lot of good, valuable information that way. I'm not going to downplay my second one. I know you asked me for one, but I'm going to take liberty. So I like for people who are just starting to do a lot of these things to, pick up the Web Application Hacker's Handbook. I think that that's a fantastic read, especially if you have a lot of questions with a lot of the basics and how some of the kind of web architecture and how different types of components talk to each other, et cetera, and the technology involved there. So that's it's a great book and resource to have. I still refer to it. So there's some great content out there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good. All right, so that is Frank Catucci. You can find him on Twitter at EN0FMC. As he also previously mentioned, we do run a OWASP chapter here in Columbia, South Carolina. If you're in the area, be sure to come out. You can check that out at www.owasp.org/index.php/Columbia. Is there anything else you'd like to plug?
Not so much. Just if you're, out there, we doing, there's some really great groups. Try to get involved in B-Sides, OWASP, those kind of things, and take a look at the cheat sheets that we contribute to. There's a lot of good content out there, and first and foremost, I urge people to reach out. If they have any inquiries or questions, I'm always willing to network and talk with people. Feel free, reach out. I'm here. Qualys allows me to do a lot of great things. A lot of, some good security research and blogs and those kind of things. So, we try to keep abreast of the latest vulnerabilities, submit CVEs with, AppSec cryptography, et cetera. So I just urge people to reach out and use resources that are there to them that I wish that were there when I was learning a lot of this stuff. But
absolutely, yep.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and I can second you on the Web Application Hacker's Handbook. It's a really easy book to go through and start getting into some of that stuff. So, and like you said, OWASP too. You can download vulnerable applications that walk you through how to do some of these exploits. All right. Well, thank you for joining me to discuss application security, Frank.
You're welcome, Tim.
Hold on, let me do that again. Thank you for joining me to discuss application security.
You are welcome, Tim.
And that will do it. Hopefully you learned something. If you didn't, drop me a line on Twitter at TimothyDBlock or email me at timothy.dblock@gmail.com and let me know what you didn't learn, and we'll try to cover it in a future podcast. Show notes can be found at timothydblock.com/EIS. If you enjoyed the show, share it with others and rate it on iTunes so it can reach others trying to explore information security. Have a good one.